You're listening to Agile, skill thrills and business chills. Join hosts Laura and Brian as they explore the skills and insights you need to succeed in today's business world. Let's dive in.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're diving into something I think we all know and sometimes love. Teams. But specifically, how they go from just a bunch of individuals to like a real high-performing unit, in the Agile world.
And what's really interesting about Agile leadership is that it really embraces the organic nature of how teams actually develop. It's not about forcing them into, some rigid mold, but kind of understanding and adapting to the different stages they naturally go through.
Okay, so no more like pushing teams uphill then.
Yeah.
But I am curious, how does Agile leadership actually play out in those early days when a team is first coming together, the forming stage? I feel like there's got to be more to it than just those awkward icebreakers and just trying to remember everyone's names.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it. You've got all these, talented people, each with their own experiences, their quirks kind of thrown together, in a room. They're all probably wondering, where do I fit in? What are the rules here?
Yes. Who's bringing the snacks?
Exactly. Maybe not that last part, but yeah, I get your point. It's about establishing that sense of belonging and really understanding the team dynamics right from the get-go.
So how does a leader even begin to, tackle that?
That's where psychological safety becomes so crucial.
Oh, I've heard about this. That's that whole feeling of being able to, speak up without fear of judgment, right?
Exactly. It's about creating this environment where, everyone feels like they can share their ideas, they can ask questions, even challenge the status quo without feeling like they're going to be ridiculed or shut down.
So it's less about, being best friends with everyone on your team and more about just fostering that respect and that open communication.
Precisely. And one company that I think really nails this is Spotify. Have you heard of their squads?
Yeah. They're small, self-organizing teams. Yeah, I've read a little bit about them.
Well, Spotify recognized early on that giving their squads a high degree of freedom and trust, right from the beginning, was so crucial for fostering, that innovation. They basically said, here's the goal, here are some resources, go figure it out.
Wow. So instead of micromanaging every step, they empowered their teams to kind of take ownership from day one. I bet that led to some pretty cool stuff.
It absolutely did, because you see, when people feel psychologically safe, they're more likely to take risks, to experiment, to share those ideas that, maybe sound a little crazy at first, but could lead to some real breakthroughs.
Yeah. It's like that saying, the best ideas come from the most unexpected places, or in this case, the most psychologically safe places.
Exactly. But we can't forget, creating that sense of safety, it's not a one-time thing. It requires ongoing effort, especially as teams move into that next phase of development.
Storming. Yes, storming. Sounds about as ominous as it feels, right?
Yeah.
It's like the calm after the forming storm, and then things start to get real.
Yeah, it definitely can feel that way. Think of it like this. You've kind of established this baseline of trust, and now everyone's comfortable enough to actually, voice their opinions, even if they clash with others, which, let's be honest, they probably will.
Oh, tell me about it. It's like that moment in a team project when suddenly everyone remembers they had a different idea of how it should be done, and everyone suddenly becomes the designer.
Exactly. And just like with that design project, this stage can be, a recipe for disaster, or it can be an incredible opportunity for growth. And the key difference really lies in how it's handled, especially by the leader.
So instead of trying to just shut down any disagreements, an Agile leader actually leans into the storm.
Precisely. They recognize that conflict, when it's channeled constructively, can actually lead to a more robust and, a more well-rounded solution in the end. It's about, embracing those healthy debates, encouraging those diverse perspectives, and then kind of guiding the team towards that, shared understanding.
It's kind of like turning that friction into fuel. In a way.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool. It reminds me of how Zappos, the online shoe company, how they experimented with that whole holacracy thing. Didn't they try to completely ditch the traditional hierarchy altogether?
Yeah, they did. They wanted to create this system where decisions were made by these self-organizing teams instead of, just a top-down structure.
That's a bold move.
Yeah.
I can only imagine that such a radical shift probably came with its own set of, challenges and maybe some bumps along the way.
Oh, absolutely. Implementing holacracy wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, you
Yeah.
know? Zappos had their fair share of disagreements and confusion as teams adjusted to this new way of working. It was a big change.
So how do they navigate that? Do they just throw up their hands and say, okay, back to the old ways?
Not at all. And that's the interesting part. They actually leaned into that storming phase. They kind of recognized that these conflicts and these disagreements, they were natural. They were even necessary for the team to figure out how this whole holacracy thing was actually going to work in practice, you know?
So instead of seeing those conflicts as failures, they saw them as like opportunities to kind of learn and adapt as they went.
Exactly. And ultimately, that's what allowed them to build a stronger, more resilient team in the long run.
Wow, what a great example of turning potential friction into fuel for growth, right? But I'm guessing even with all the storming out of the way, the journey to becoming, a truly high-performing team, it's not over, is it?
You are absolutely right. That's where norming comes in. But maybe we can dive into that after a quick break.
All right, so we made it through the choppy waters of storming. Hopefully some healthy debate led to some breakthroughs, but where we go from there?
That's where norming comes in. Think of it as the team, finding its groove. They've kind of weathered the storms. They've clarified roles a bit, and they've started to build that shared understanding of how they want to work together.
So it's less about the dramatic, showdowns and more about finding a rhythm that works for everyone.
Exactly. And remember how we talked about psychological safety being so important in that forming stage? Well, it's huge here, too.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. You want to make sure everyone still feels comfortable, respected, especially as you're like figuring out those shared norms and processes.
Absolutely. And here's where Agile leadership takes a slightly different approach. Instead of, actively directing the team, they start to step back a little and empower them to really take ownership of those processes.
So less micromanaging, more trusting the team to, manage itself. That's a big leap for some leaders, I'd imagine.
It can be, but it's a crucial step in fostering that, high-performing team. Think about it. They've gone through the ringer of forming and storming. They've built a foundation of trust, open communication, and now they're ready to actually put all those lessons into practice.
Right. It's like they graduated from teen boot camp or something and they're ready to take on the world.
Exactly. And just like any good leader sending their troops into the field, an Agile leader knows when to step back and let the team shine.
So what does that look like in the real world? Any companies come to mind that are really good at this norming stage?
Absolutely. Remember Google's Project Aristotle? They spent years trying to figure out what makes teams successful.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Wasn't that the one where they found that, psychological safety was, the biggest predictor of a team's success?
That's the one. But what's really interesting is how they figured that out. See, they thought the best teams would have all these specific things in common, like, the right mix of introverts and extroverts, or maybe they all had shared hobbies or something.
So they were looking for, that magic formula for the perfect team.
Exactly. But what they actually found was that the biggest factor wasn't any of that stuff. It was psychological safety.
Wow. So it really all comes back to that feeling of being able to be yourself on the team, take risks, share ideas without being judged for it. It's like the bedrock of a high-performing team.
Precisely. And it's during this norming stage that those feelings of safety, they really start to turn into those tangible norms and behaviors.
Right. So it's not enough to just have it written down somewhere that we value open communication. You gotta actually live it every day.
Exactly. And that's what Google found. The teams that really thrived, it wasn't always the ones with the most talented people, It was the teams where everyone felt comfortable speaking their mind, challenging each other respectfully, and holding each other accountable.
It's like they created a space where it was safe to fail and learn and grow together.
Exactly. And that leads us to that final and most exciting stage of team development, performing. This is where all those hard lessons, all those shared norms, all that trust, they come together to create something really remarkable.
All right, now you've got me on the edge of my seat. Tell me about this performing stage. What makes it so special?
Well, imagine a team that's not just working together, but they're operating as this single unit. They know what each other are thinking, they just flow through challenges, and they're consistently achieving these amazing results.
Okay, that sounds almost too good to be true. Some teams would kill for that kind of synchronicity.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing it takes more than just good vibes and positive affirmations to get there, right? It does sound kind of like the dream, right? Like, how does any team actually reach that level?
Well, it's not always easy reaching that performing stage. It takes a lot of, hard work, dedication, and honestly, a little luck never hurts.
Right. Luck always helps. But so it's more than just like, checking things off a list. Like it sounds like it takes a deeper level of trust, being vulnerable, really creating that space where everyone can like thrive.
You hit the nail on the head. It's about going beyond those surface level things. And while it might sound a little, I don't know, utopian, there are companies out there that have figured out how to make performing their like default mode.
Okay, yeah, you got to give me an example. Who's doing this whole performing thing really well?
Well, one that comes to mind right away is Netflix. You familiar with their freedom and responsibility thing?
Oh, yeah. They're big on giving their employees a ton of freedom, right? Like trusting them to make major decisions.
Exactly. And that trust is a huge part of what makes them so successful. They really empower their teams to take charge, to innovate, to push the limits without someone looking over their shoulder the whole time.
Wow, that's a lot of freedom. But I'm guessing that also comes with, some pretty high expectations, right?
Oh, absolutely. Netflix is very clear about their goals, their values. They're basically saying, we trust you to make the right call.
So it's not just about letting people do whatever they want. It's about giving them the freedom to really knock it out of the park, but within a framework, right? Like shared goals, values, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It's about setting those clear expectations, but then giving people the space to, meet those expectations in their own way. And Netflix has found that when you do that, some pretty incredible things can happen.
It does seem like they've really found something special there. But I'm sure it's not always perfect, right? I mean, teams change, projects evolve. Sometimes you just hit a wall. How do they deal with those kinds of curveballs, especially when they could, like, totally derail a team that's really hitting their stride?
That's such a crucial point. And honestly, it's something that often gets overlooked when we're talking about teams and how they develop. Because even the best teams, they experience regression.
Regression, like going backward, like from performing back to storming kind of thing.
Exactly. It's like in those movies, where the hero thinks they've finally beaten the villain, and then bam, the villain comes back even stronger.
Yeah, okay, maybe not quite as dramatic in The Office, but I get what you mean. Even the best teams, they aren't immune to hitting a rough patch.
Exactly. And that's where this concept of the regression curveball comes in. It's that unexpected thing that pops up and throws even the most, high-functioning team completely off track.
So how does an Agile leader handle this curveball? Do they try to, force the team back into that performing mode? Or is it something different?
That's the thing about Agile leadership. It's about adapting, right?
Wow.
So it's less about fixing the team and more about guiding them through a kind of reset. Because regression, it's not always a bad thing. Sometimes it's a sign that the team just needs to adjust, maybe revisit their norms, or even go back to some of those earlier stages of development.
So it's not about starting over completely, but recognizing that growth isn't always linear. Sometimes you got to take a step back to move forward.
Exactly. And a good Agile leader, they get that. They understand that sometimes taking a step back is actually the smartest move.
That's pretty insightful. It's like this delicate dance, knowing when to step in, when to step back.
Yeah.
Any companies come to mind that are particularly good at navigating this whole Agile approach to regression?
One that's a really good example is Buffer. They're a fully remote company, and as you can imagine, building that strong team culture with everyone, scattered around the globe, it's not easy.
Oh, for sure. Keeping everyone on the same page when you're remote, that's a challenge, even without any curveballs, right?
Absolutely. And Buffer, they've definitely had their share of those curveballs over the years. As they've grown, they've had teams go through periods where communication would break down or productivity would take a hit, just, those natural growing pains.
So how did they handle those situations? What did they do that was different?
Well, the key is that from the very beginning, Buffer made transparency and open communication a priority. So when things would get tough, when they'd hit those bumps, they didn't try to brush it under the rug.
Oh, interesting. So instead of pretending everything was fine, they faced it head on.
Exactly. They really encouraged those open and honest conversations about what was working, what wasn't working. They took another look at their processes, make sure everyone was on the same page about expectations, and they weren't afraid to make changes along the way.
It sounds like they almost saw those regression moments as learning opportunities, not just failures.
Exactly. That's the thing about agile leadership. It's about being adaptable, being open to learning from those bumps in the road. And most importantly, it's about trusting your team to work through those challenges and come out the other side stronger.
What a great way to look at it. So if there's one big takeaway for our listeners, especially those who are maybe just starting to build their own teams or, navigate the world of agile leadership, what would it be? What's the most important thing to remember?
Remember that building a high-performing team, especially in the fast-paced world of Agile, it's a journey. And like any good journey, there are going to be detours and bumps along the way. But if you can create a foundation of trust, you encourage open communication, and you stay adaptable, well, that journey can be just as rewarding as actually reaching the destination.
I love that. It's about the journey and the destination. Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us into the world of agile team growth. I know I've definitely learned a lot, and I hope our listeners have too. And to everyone listening, until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.